Hey, everybody. My name is Matthew Fredrickson, and I'm the Director of Open Source Software Development at Sangoma. And my job is to take care, or I have responsibility over the Asterisk project as well as the Freepbx project at Sangoma. And I like to talk about that and talk about what's happened this last year for both those projects at the end of AstriCon. And it's kind of a tradition we've had for a very long time. And so I hope that you'll be patient as I go through some of the updates. Some things you may be very interested in, some things other people may be interested in. But I hope to catch a variety of topics and new features and developments that may be appealing to a broad audience. All right, so to get started, in the land of Asterisk, there have been 8. So we have a number of actively maintained branches, 18, 16, and 13 right now. And they've 18 and 16 have both, well, sorry, 18 and 16. I said 13. I shouldn't have done that. 18 and 16, and they've both received 8 bug fix releases, and they have had a number of point releases over the past year. Asterisk 13 and 17 are now end of life. So no more security fixes even for them. And there have been 1,220 merged code reviews across all branches this last year, which is a lot of contributions and effort from a code review perspective. All right, so as far as Asterisk Forums go, we like to talk about stats in the beginning a little bit. You can use them. It's at community.asterisk.org if you like forums. And there have been over 9,100 new posts this last year and over 625 new contributors. So for any of you that watch these presentations I do every year, this is probably no surprise, but Asterisk 19 has been released. Yay. So another new release of Asterisk this year. It's been composed of 348 different code reviews and about 50 different contributors. So lots of people from lots of different places moving the project forward. And I kind of like to give a little bit of a wall of fame in terms of Asterisk contributors. And here's our top contributors by the number of code reviews merged. And there's a number of people both within Sangoma and outside Sangoma on this list. And so I want to thank everybody, particularly that have gone through the code review process with Asterisk and the code contribution process and stuck it through and got your change or your bug fix included within Asterisk. All right, so I like to talk about releases just to remind everybody, particularly those who aren't extremely familiar with how releases work, standard releases versus LTS releases in Asterisk. So standard releases have a year of bug fixes and a year of additional security fixes. Some examples of that are the 17 branch and now the newly formed 19 branch. LTSs in Asterisk land receive 4 years of bug fixes and 1 additional year of security fixes. And some examples of that are 16 and 18. And typically, although this, there have been exceptions to that, but typically every other branch is a standard release and every other branch is an LTS release. So they kind of alternate. So Asterisk 19, what's new? So we have a variety of topics that we're going to discuss today. Again, just to re-emphasize that the things that we pick are we cherry pick these from the big long list of changes and things like that, and there are far more changes than we discuss in this presentation. But hopefully there'll be a few things that may be of interest to lots of different people. So topics are stir shaken, speech to text, RTCP, PJSIP, a little bit of project policy for module deprecation policy, and my favorite topic, or my favorite category, is miscellaneous fun. So just to kind of give a little bit of background, we participated in a open source SIPIT conference. So SIPIT is a conference that used to be composed of industry players, so big telecom industry players that happen, about once a year or so. And it was a SIP interoperability conference to make sure everybody's SIP stacks were compliant with each other. And as new RFCs were added, that everybody implemented them in a way that was that everybody could talk to each other properly. And they opted not to do that. A couple of years ago, they stopped doing the SIPIC conference. And so some of the open source projects got together to do kind of an open SIPIT event to do some testing on some newer technologies like stir and shaken, and then make sure that at least the open source vendors, that we were all interoperable and compliant against each other, which was very good, but particularly since it was a very fast moving standard, and things were changing, but it was being adopted very quickly. It was good to have the opportunity to do these interoperability tests, because I think a lot of people found bugs and issues and things like that in their implementation. And so along with that, we found a few things as well, which was really good. And that, I don't know if you recall last year, but Stir Shaken was kind of a big part of 18. And we had some more things in Stir Shaken land that we did as part of the 19 cycle as well to fix some of the issues that we found. Some of those included issues with multiple SIP authentication headers. Let's see, we added support for RSA certificates alongside ECDSA certificates. We now support X509 encoded certificates. There were some issues with local certificate caching that we identified. We also needed to switch to base64 URL encoding, and we added the date header and some other fields that we needed to that were missing. So again, the goal is to become more compliant with the specification and other implementations. So all current changes and improvements and fixes and things like that have also gone back into the 16 and 18 implementations of Stir and Shaken. And you can check the sample configuration file and release notes to get some more information about it. And there's some more work on that coming. Also, speech to text land. So when we were looking at Astros, one of the big areas that we felt that was the world was kind of changing on, and that there was some need to improve upon, was the speech to text, speech to text technology within Asterisk. So, I don't know if you remember, but previously we added support for this thing called external media, or we called it external media support, primarily to be used by ARI developers, so Asterisk REST interface developers, so programmers building REST-based applications around Asterisk using its RESTful API. It seemed like that we did a pretty good job with that, but it did not allow us to hook back into Asterisk traditional dial plan. So that functionality didn't allow dial plan developers to be able to hook into those services, as well as mostly the hooks and information necessary so that that an external REST application developer could do that primarily. And so we decided that we probably need to kind of complete that work, or extend that work, so that dial plan developers could use the speech-to-text applications within Asterisk with some of these new providers that we have, particularly like, there's a lot of options now with Google and Amazon and some of the other big players providing externally hosted speech-to-text engines. And so the problem, though, was so each one of these providers have different ways of communicating with them. They've used different audio formats. They've got different ways of returning responses when it detects speech, or detects, speech that needs to be turned into text and things like that. And, there's a solid argument to be made that you probably don't want to do there are arguments to be made that you don't want to do a lot of this provider-specific code within Asterisk. So, these providers also, a lot of times they'll provide SDKs and things like that allow applications to be able to hook directly up to them. A lot of them don't provide C SDKs. And so that probably would have put us in a spot, if we tried to do it directly within Asterisk, of trying to sort of reverse engineer / chase a lot of these speech-to-text providers and do it in C code too, which is never a great place to have to make lots of changes and things like that. It's a very low-level language. And so we opted to actually do the process of abstracting between different providers and things like that, and kick that outside of Asterisk so that you could use, nicer, more convenient languages for doing that as well. And so that was kind of the thought process behind that, is sort of have an external proxy that managed the different speech providers and things like that, and then turned it back into something that Astros could understand. And so, there's 4 parts in building this, building this technology. There's 4 major parts. There's kind of a protocol that has to exist between Asterisk and this external translator or proxy that sits between Asterisk and the provider. And then there's the actual external translator itself, or the guy that actually speaks to the speech to text engine and then turns that into something that Asterisk can understand. And then you've got to build a module in Asterisk to be able to talk that protocol and turn it into something that the Asterisk dial plan applications can understand. And obviously you have the dial plan functionality. And so again, the connectivity portion of it is pushed out. The protocol is simple. That is spoken between Asterisk and the translator is JSON-based and WebSocket-based protocol. And so again, this allows you to use nice languages. You can use high-level languages, PHP or Node or whatever, to talk to those providers using their SDKs. And then you just have to turn it into a simple protocol, vendor abstract protocol back to Asterisk if you're implementing one yourself. And so we, as part of this work, we're building one ourselves, and we'll be publishing that. So there'll be a proof of concept of how someone might implement an external translator to one or potentially more of these providers. And so that'll be available for people to download and use and things like that. On the Asterisk side, the C module will have to be written the C module is written, will have to be, the C module is necessary so that Asterisk can actually speak this new protocol. And so that's part of it. And the translator will pass. So the way it'll work is, when Asterisk has a call or a conference that someone wants to implement or to do speech recognition on, it'll send the media out to the translator, and the translator will send that out to whatever provider you're using. And then the provider will send, the information about it in the form of, some sort of response, like, this person said such and such, or these are the words that I detected. And then the translator will send that response back to Asterisk in a JSON payload, where Asterisk can turn that into something that like dial plan applications and things like that can use. So we'd hope to have this work for the most part done at this point, but this year has actually been a lot busier year than we expected. We've had a lot more work on the stir shaken front than we realized. So that, we were hoping when we released Astros 18 that was mostly done, but as more and more vendors and interops and things like that have happened, I think and the standard has, evolved a little bit. There's been more work to be done on the stir shaken front than I think we anticipated this last year. So it's impacted some of the other new project work that we were trying to hit this year. So this one is still in progress, but hopefully in an early release of 19, we'll be able to push it out there. All right, on the RTCP front, just to give a reminder, in the land of real-time audio, you have RTP, however you want to say it, which conveys media information like your audio or potentially your video over the internet. And then you have RTCP, which goes with the RTP. So they kind of work hand in hand, and it goes along with the audio stream or the video stream that may be going back and forth. And what the RTCP does is it conveys metadata about it, like packet loss statistics and things like that. Something that might be interesting to a sender about conditions, receiver side conditions of the audio or video stream. As part of our multi-year effort to improve WebRTC functionality in Asterisk, this last year we decided that it would be important to audit our RTCP stack. It's very old, and it goes back to some of the earlier days of Asterisk, and I don't think we've had a chance to comprehensively audit it. And so we did that. And we, in that process, we also extended the test coverage around it as well. So why this is probably more important now than ever is that video over the internet, which is becoming more important day by day as more and more people use video regularly, relies heavily on those RTCP statistics being correct and conveying accurate information. And it's very, very sensitive to packet loss and poor network conditions. And so making sure that those statistics are accurate so that senders can act appropriately has become a lot more important than it ever was before. Audio is a lot less sensitive, and audio senders are a lot less sensitive, or it's not as necessary for audio senders to have that information to be able to provide a good audio experience, or it hasn't been to this point. So we found out actually a few things. We found a few things wrong. So we found out that our standard deviation calculation was incorrect. We also found out the minimum loss packets value was, if it was set to 0, it was counted when it shouldn't have been. And if you saw weird values in our dial plan RTCP stats for perfectly fine call, it's probably due to some of these issues that we found. On the PJSIP front, this is actually a really neat thing that happened this last year. But so if you are using, if you're trying to configure a PJSIP endpoint to be able to talk to Asterisk, what you have to do first is you have to set up a transport. So transports in PJSIP land are essentially a way of describing the ways that Asterisk may talk SIP to an endpoint. And they define like the protocol that's used, whether it's like UDP or TCP or TLS or whatever. And they also define what port the Asterisk is sitting on or that you're going to be using to listen. And there has been, so you can reload a lot of, you can warm reload a lot of things in PJSIP, and you can enable experimental. You have been able to enable experimental transport reload for a while on the transport objects, but there was a race condition in that process. That's why it was experimental, and we were able to remove that race condition and be able to make it so that transport objects can be reloaded. That's to say there are certain values that it covers and certain values that it doesn't cover in terms of the transport objects, so different aspects of it. But it is definitely a safe thing to do at this point. And there's a possibility of adding reload of other attributes to the transport, such as maybe new TLS certificates and things like that might be interesting to add as well in the future. All right, so this is kind of project policy type things, but we added an official module deprecation policy. So Astros is, it's a very mature project. We've been around for a long time, and there are pieces of code that either people don't use anymore or that developers have, there have already been successors written for that functionality, and developers aren't maintaining the old version of that and things like that. And so we wanted to make sure to solidify our deprecation policy so that people understood, as we graduate modules to sort of end of life and pass them on to the great beyond, that we had a very well documented and written policy. And Josh Culp over the Astros team at Sangoma did a really good job working with the team to try to have a well written and well defined policy. And so that was a good thing, I think, from a predictability perspective for people that use Asterisk in infrastructure and network environments, understanding if there are particular modules that you have an interest in or may impact you, having a nice place where you can see, what the policy is as far as if they are deprecated, when they're going to go, or even if your modules that you may be using are impacted, and having a nice place to go to check that out. That's kind of all part of this. So there's a procedure. So initial proposal happens to the developer mailing list. So if you do have an interest in Astros modules that you want to be deprecated, it might behoove you to keep apprised of what's going on the developer mailing list, and so that you can weigh in if somebody wants to propose to deprecate something that you care very much about. And there's a certain time, or only on certain releases can modules be proposed for deprecation. So in preparation for standard releases, so instead of versus LTS, so in preparation for standard releases, a lot of times people will propose deprecation. They can only be marked as deprecated in a new standard release, like 19 or 17 or whatever. And that deprecated marking on the module. So deprecated does not mean it's gone yet. It just means it's on the way out, right? So in preparation, well, as part of that, the module is marked as deprecated as its support status, and that's carried over into the subsequent LTS release. So if it started in let's say something was marked as deprecated in 19, it would also carry over into 20. So Asterisk 20, whenever it's released, it would also be marked as deprecated in 20, and then in the next standard release, it would be actually removed from the source code tree. All right, and there's also, as mentioned, an Asterisk module deprecations wiki page that kind of talks about the policy and also gives some information about when things, which modules are impacted. And so you may want to keep on top of that and watch that in case something hits you. And better early than later. All right, so Asterisk 19, miscellaneous fun. This is my favorite category name. Here's the other fun stuff we've changed or improved. You can now force estimated bitrate for video in ConfBridge. So you can, if you need to do large conferences where you want to make sure that you aren't exceeding bandwidth limitations and things like that of your server-side bandwidth limitations on let's say the Asterisk instance, you can force the estimated bitrate for video in that case for all the participants or something like that. And that way you can cap it out essentially if you'd like. We've also improved PJSIP registrar logging to include IP addresses. Options handling in PJSIP can now, you don't have to authenticate options requests if you don't want to. The stun software attribute can now be disabled. So as part of the, in the WebRTC stack, it uses ICE, which takes advantage of the stun protocol. And now you don't have to list the software attribute in stun packets. The min, max, and ABS dial plan functions have been added to funcmath, and RPort can now be disabled in PJSIP using disable RPort. Yay! PJSIP headers can now be listed using PJSIP headers dial plan function, which is pretty cool. The app dial A option now allows playing to the caller as well as the callee. And the originate dial plan function or application allows setting variables on the originating channel, which is cool. Also, dialog info plus XML support is now in PJSIP that can provide caller ID information for anybody that's monitoring another endpoint, which is pretty cool. And that was actually that was one that a community developer implemented, and a couple community members worked to move that forward. And so really grateful for that. All right, here are a few reminders. Asterisk 13 and 17 are end of life. I mentioned earlier, I'll mention again. This, I don't think I can over talk about this one because Asterisk 13 probably was the longest running release we've ever had due to some complicated things as far as releases go and extensions and longer timeframes than normal between releases. But it has reached that time of life where it has stopped receiving security fixes and it is end of life. And so if you're still on 13, you really need to move forward. Asterisk 16 is LTS and goes to security fix only in 2022. So keep your eyes out for that. If you're moving off 13, it's probably better to move to 18 instead of 16. I would urge you all to keep track of what's going on in newer non-LTS releases of Asterisk. A lot of times there's a tendency for people to move from LTS to LTS, and sometimes things change between LTS versions that it'd be better to find out about sooner. ChanZip, for those of you that either are new here or don't remember, is slowly marching to its end. It has already been marked as deprecated, and it will be eventually removed from the source tree. And as of Asterisk 19, ChanSip will not be built by default. So for those that build from source, it will not be part of the default build. It's still in the source tree. You can explicitly mark it as, you can mark it to build if you want as part of a custom build, but the standard build will not include it. And so also, keep on top of what's going on in the Asterisk versions wiki page, and I'd urge you to check out the new module deprecation policy and deprecation wiki pages. All right, so now I'm going to move on to Freepbx. So in Freepbx land, there have been on the community forum. So Freepbx also has community forums. There have been over 26,000 new posts and over 1,100 new contributors. So it's pretty active community forums. Freepbx 16, let's talk about that. So the beta was released a few months ago, and testing has gone generally well. There was a very extensive QA effort to requalify Freepbx 16 against PHP7, and it was probably more than 6 months. I put 6 there. It's probably more than 6 months. And I just want to make sure to give a shout out to community members that have been working on PHP7 outside of Sangoma, especially, who have been pushing for this for a while. So, particularly Bill Simon. I think Bill Simon's done a lot of PHP7 related patches to the open source sides of Freepbx. And so we're really grateful for everybody that have been pushing hard to help out in moving the code base to PHP7. Some of the big things we want to talk about in Freepbx 16 are PHP7 support, as mentioned before. So there's some performance improvements between PHP 5 and PHP 7, and which we hope to be able to take advantage of in Freepbx. And we would anticipate seeing improvements with large system management and other things that involve PHP intensive work or computation and things like that. It's also more appealing for developers in general who want to work on a more current version of PHP. And the work to get PHP 7 support in Freepbx 16 has taken place not just on the open source modules, but also on the commercial modules. We've added more GraphQL APIs. So we're continuing to push GraphQL on the API front. And there have been many more APIs that have been added, particularly for system management and provisioning. And you can find a lot more information on the Freepbx wiki if you would like to learn more about it. SIP driver, right? We talked about ChanSip, ChanPJSip at the Astros level. Let's talk about it at the Freepbx level. So pushing forward with the ChanPJSip migration and ChanSip being deprecated, we're also on the Freepbx front trying to also make similar changes to move PJSip more into focus. So, ChanSip does not receive, just so it's clear to everybody, ChanSip does not generally receive any kind of maintenance at all, not even from community members, not from Sangoma developers. It just kind of is what it is. There are a number of outstanding bugs and issues on it that just have not been addressed. And really, if you may ask why, but fundamentally, ChanSip has some problems, and that's the reason why ChanPJSip was created. And it's very unlikely that they'll be fixed. So if you have a problem with ChanSip, there's not really anybody that can help you with that as far as bug fixes and things like that. And so we would very much urge everyone to move forward to ChanPJSip. ChanPJSip is very old. It's, I think, eight-ish years old or something like that. It's been around for a very long time. It's been used in lots and lots of different products. Lots of different people use it. It performs significantly better than ChanSip. So it does multi-core scaling. It actually does multi-core scaling across multiple CPUs for protocol handling and things like that. So the more cores you throw at it, the more the better SIP handling it does in terms of SIP message volume, SIP message handling, things like high volume SIP message handling. And so we would urge you to move your systems over to ChanPJSip instead of ChanSip if you have not done so yet. So as part of all that, ChanSip is now disabled by default in Freepbx 16. So just to try to get people moving forward, it can be re-enabled in the advanced settings if needed, but we just really we're trying to give everybody as much runway as you can get, but we really, really want people to start. If you haven't moved, it's time to move. All right, Ucp User Templates. So somewhere between, I think, 13 and 14, Ucp User Templates used to exist for those of you that use UCP. And somewhere between 13 and 14, I think that they were missed due to some significant code changes in UCP. And so that was one of our big things we wanted to hit, is make sure to re-add those back in. So I say re-add, but it was kind of re-implement UCP user templates so that people can enjoy those again. And so they're back, and I hope that you're able to try it and use it and enjoy it if that's something that is important in your use of Freepbx. All right, so security improvements, firewall intrusion detection improvements. There have been many of those. Integrated whitelist between sysadmin and firewall modules. There's responsive firewall. On the responsive firewall, we've got adjustable thresholds now, so those are exposed so that you can adjust them if you'd like. Those are both good things from a configurability perspective and adjustment perspective, because sometimes they can be sensitive to different types of traffic and things like that. But that they need more adjustment for. We've got HTTPS redirect support, so you can now force redirect from HTTP to HTTPS in the GUI, and you've got the ability to be very specific about what SSL protocols that you'd like to support in Freepbx as well. Additionally, these are just some of these things are things that may impact you in different ways or may just not impact you, but the Asterisk Manager interface is now not binding to all interfaces on a Freepbx system. This was a decision that was made. It probably should have been done a long time ago, but it's kind of a security. It can present potential security problems if you leave it open to the wide world accidentally. And so we've got the manager interface. We decided instead of binding to all the different network interfaces on the system, it only binds to localhost. So that means that only listens to applications that are running by default on the local system. If you are a application developer that utilizes the manager interface and listens to it on another Freepbx instance, then you may need to customize this value so it's not set to localhost, or set it to whatever interface that you want it to listen on. We've also added Ucp Password Validation, so to keep people from having 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever very simple password set up as their passwords. We've got complexity rules and things like that are implemented that can nudge users appropriately to select better passwords for their endpoints. As part of the Freepbx 16 work and the PHP7 work, we had to move the licensing core to an engine called IronCube instead of Zengard, because Zengard did not support newer versions of PHP. So that was kind of that was a thing that was necessary for us to do commercial module support and some of the things that were important. Additionally, Sangoma, so these are commercial module improvements. Additionally, Sangoma CRM has been updated to integrate with Zapier. And I guess just for those that use the D phones and the Sangoma phones, EPM now fully supports the D phones in using their native application. So previously, dphone support utilized the XML applications using the JavaScript engine on the phone. We added support in EPM so that the D series and the new P series phones use the native applications on the phones with EPM instead, which is pretty nice. A lot of people like the native applications as their way of interacting with the phone and the PBX and things like that. So let's talk about distro. So this came up last year. We wanted to update the distro, and then for Freepbx 16. Right now, the distro SNG7 is based on CentOS 7. And I think it was like in December, I think, of last year. It was like a month or two after AstriCon. The CentOS guys decided to drop the big news that the new version of CentOS, CentOS 8, was not going to have the expected support lifecycle that historically it had, and that everybody that was counting on that was just going to have to deal with it, and that made us have to take a step back in terms of our distro change and direction and things like that to figure out what the right thing to do was. The dust has kind of settled since then. It's been kind of a bumpy year in trying to figure out what would happen in terms of the reaction to that message, and it impacted plans for making SNG8 part of Freepbx 16. So any SNG8 that will be done will probably be part of a follow-up release of Freepbx. And so we are still working on an SNG8 distro, and we hope to be able to see that going forward. It's still going to be based on a Red Hat Enterprise Linux derivative like CentOS is. And I don't know, right now the leading contender is Rocky. So Rocky Linux was started by the guy who started the CentOS project a long time ago, before it was bought by Red Hat. And so he created kind of a new fork of Red Hat Enterprise Linux that was called Rocky Linux, outside of Red Hat, that enjoys the same support lifecycle and is still downstream. It sits sort of in the same position as RHEL in terms of the how it receives contributions and things like that. But I would urge you to stay tuned for more details. All right, I think that's pretty much it on the Asterisk and Freepbx front. Thank you very much for your time and for your patience as I've gone through some of these, some of the new features and functionality that have been added. Again, this is not everything. This is just a few highlighted and curated items that I get to talk about, or decide to talk about, or thought that people might find interesting, or general audiences might find interesting. But there's much, much more. And so I'd urge you to look at changelogs and look at wiki pages and things like that to be able to see some of the other changes. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you all have had a good AstriCon.
Ladies and gentlemen, now joining live to wrap up day 2, we have Matthew Fredrickson, George Joseph, Ben Ford, Walter Moon, Frank Denard, Mike Bradeen, Kevin Harwell, Lauren Getz, and Matt Brooks. Gentlemen, the floor is all yours.
All right. Do we have everybody? Do we think everybody made it? I think there's a bigger pile of people than we probably had at the end of one of these calls so far.
And pardon the interruption, ladies and gentlemen, to get a better view of our panelists, you may click on the icon in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and select Tiled. Thank you.
All right. Let's see. I think we've got everybody. Do we have a Frank on here? Let's see if we can check where Frank is real quick.
I'm getting him right now for you. One moment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess while we're waiting, just so everybody knows, so these are members of the Astros and Freepbx development teams here at Sangoma. And I guess we'll give everybody a chance to introduce themselves real quick. If you could say your name and your favorite part of either Astros or Freepbx you'd like to work on, that would be much appreciated. I guess we'll start with you, Kevin. Do you want to go?
Oh, man. Put me in the hot seat first. All right. I am Kevin Harwell, and I am an Astros developer for Sangoma. My favorite part, is it okay if I say all the parts?
That's a cop-out answer right there. But you
I don't know. RTP can be fun. Should I say RTP? Yeah, I'll say RTP.
Okay, that's appropriate given, I guess, that you did the work this last year. I think on the RTCP, some of the work on the RTCP stack, right? This last year.
A little bit, dealing with some stuff that has not been included yet. So.
All right. Next, would you like to go, Josh?
Sure, why not? Hi, everybody. You may remember me from a talk on PJ-SIP, so if you're already guessing what I'm most excited for about working on an Asterisk, yeah, it's PJ-SIP. But I'm the Asterisk technical lead, so I basically figure out what Asterisk is, what it might be, that kind of stuff. Yay.
Thanks, Josh. And that's right. And actually, Josh is responsible for a lot of the technical day-to-day of the Astros project and a lot of the day tomorrow of the Astros project as well. So he's the guy to know if you want something in. Let's see. Matt Brooks, would you like to go next?
Sure, I can go. So Matt Brooks, I'm on the Freepbx team. I guess my favorite part's just the Php7 cloud. I'm working on that.
That's a good answer. Yeah, so Matt Brooks has been working on the team that's been doing a lot of the Php7 cloud improvements that we've been working on for a while, and he's been driving a lot of the GraphQL work. Actually, that stuff has kind of driven a lot of the GraphQL changes that have gone for Php7. All right, Ben Ford, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Ben. I'm on the Astros team, and I guess my favorite thing is any new development that we do. So I guess most recently for me, Start Shaking.
Are you sure you want to give that answer, Ben?
I'll take it back.
There can be too much of a good thing, right? Anyway, that was a good response. Yeah, so Ben's been doing a lot of the work around Stir Shake, and he's done a great job with it. Let's see, Lauren, would you like to talk about your background and introduce yourself?
Sure. Yep. I've spent most of my formative VoIP time doing support for Freepbx and Asterisk, and my favorite part is the one-off oddball requests that I can fix using Asterisk dial plan. That's where I'm most comfortable. I think if I spend my days doing extend equals pointy bracket, I'd live happily ever after.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Lauren. And actually, Lauren also is the community manager on the Astros and Freepbx front as well. So he works a lot with the community on a day-to-day basis. And he does product management too. So he talks to salespeople and figures out what things are very important to them. And then we try to put it in the big list of what we're going to work on next, right? Let's see, among many other things. All right, so next, George, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm George. I work on the Asterisk team. It's really hard to say what favorite part is, but I guess I'm going to cop out too and say whatever's the hot item of the day, or week, or month, or year. And I guess coming up, that's E911.
Yep, that is definitely going to be impacting us in the next little bit here. Thanks, George. Let's see. Next, Walter, would you like to introduce yourself and give a little bit of your background, what you're interested in?
Sure. I'm Walter. I'm with the Freepbx dev team. I guess my favorite part is probably dealing with the endpoint manager, just because I like messing around with a bunch of different phones and pressing buttons. So yeah, I'll go with that.
A good answer. All right, next we have Mike Brady, who is actually the most recent member, recent addition to the Astros development team. Mike, do you want to talk about yourself a little bit?
Not really, but I will. So I've been in telephony for 20 years or so, sort of going between support and development roles, originally helping people like write their own layer 5 applications, things like that. Some stuff even before SIP, or we would just stream RTP bidirections and just handle that all ourselves. I'm probably most interested in is like working with other elements, right? So how we interface with the network as a whole, and I think dealing hopefully dealing long term with being able to interface with mobile clients and things that are moving and are sort of outside traditional SIP is what I'm looking forward to.
Thanks, Mike. All right, Frank, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. From now, I'm working on dev team, Freepbx dev team. My favorite module is maybe PMS stuff. Sometimes So sometimes I like to work on firewall model, on the sysadmin model. Sysadmin model is very interesting because it touches something different systems like a network, etc., etc. So it's pretty interesting. Firewall model is sometimes is hard, sometimes is easy, sometimes is middle. So it's different, but my favorite module is really PMS, maybe as sysadmin. Whatever. Also, I like to work on UCP as well. So whatever. It's my 3 top modules that I like.
Thank you very much, Frank, and thanks for introducing yourself. And actually, Frank's done a lot of the hard work on some of the firewall changes we've seen over the last year in Freepbx 15. Let's see. Did I miss anybody? I tried to go through the list of videos at the bottom of the screen, but they kept reordering. So hopefully I didn't miss anybody in the lineup. And we have a few more developers, but some of them are in different time zones, and we can't catch them right now. But this is a Q&A session. We usually open it up with engineers and myself and with Lauren to answer general questions about Asterisk or Freepbx over this last year, and try to get feedback from community members about how things have gone. So I guess with that, I'll check the Q&A box to see where we are. And there are no questions. All right, guys. Guess we're no. I should probably check the chat rooms too. Does anybody else have any questions there?
There was a question if my phone worked, and yes, it does work, but it's not hooked up at the moment.
Oh, the hard phone in the back.
Yeah, the rotary phone.
I got a question about archiving the video after the fact. There is plans to post everything in the last 2 days from AstriCon, presumably the Spanish track as well, to YouTube when it's all done.
That's great. Tell you what, I know I mentioned it in the room, but I'm going to probably rewatch Josh's presentation a few times on PJSIP, because every time I hear him talk about it, I learn something new. All right, looks like there are a couple questions. Oh, okay, somebody asked, any idea when the Astros Advanced Training is going to be provided again? I am not actually sure about that, but I do know that we have a training department, and that would be probably a good question to maybe give them a call or send them an email and talk to them about that, and ask them what the schedule is, I guess, as far as that goes. Let's see, there's another one. What's the next major feature being worked on for Asterisk? Well, I'm gonna let it's tricky, like trying to figure out what the next major feature is, right? There's the stuff that, so typically the planning cycle for Asterisk is, we will kind of plan out a year's worth of development and features. We've got some multi-year efforts and initiatives. So a few of the themes that we've had that are multi-year efforts and initiatives are like, video/WebRTC. We've been working on that for a few years. Continually pushing forward PJSIP, so making sure that there's no good reason why anybody would still want to use ChanSIP, at least any with technical merit, right? And things of that nature, right? So there's been a few that we've kind of pushed over time. And then typically what we do after AstriCon is we kind of discuss the feedback we get from community members, and we talk to different parts of Sangoma, and we try to sort of make the big list and plan out, where we would like to hit, or what we'd like to hit in terms of the next year of development for Astros. But there are a few things this year that we are pretty solidly sure of in advance. George, do you want to, and George kind of alluded to it earlier. George, do you want to talk for a few minutes about what you're going to be working on?
In regards to like E911?
Yeah, specifically E911. Yeah, I guess that's the most imminent thing, right?
Yeah, it is. And we do have a deadline coming up the end of the year to be able to provide, I think it's the basic location support, right? I'm kind of looking at Josh too, because I've only just started going through all the documentation and requirements for it. But one of the things that is involved there is the ability to handle more than just an SDP in SIP transactions. So right now we support the SDP, obviously, which is basically just a text content type, but we are going to have to start supporting a mixed content type in SIP requests. So there may be an SDP paired with an XML document for the E911 location information. So that's the big thing that's coming up, at least for E911.
Thanks, George. And there are a few other things too. Josh, I'm guessing you could probably add a few things to that list as well, right?
So the stuff that comes to mind, we will be continuing the speech-to-text work that Matt talked about in the wrap-up presentation. Something else we will also be continuing, I expect, the codec negotiation work. Other things came up before that, but hope to get back to that as well. Those are the things that come to mind. Something I'd like to see, and I'm sure others would like to see, is tele-URI support in PJSIP. We'll see if that happens. Hopefully, maybe we'll see. But,
I can't believe you went to the feature that shall not be named, the tele-URI thing, Josh.
I felt obligated to do so based on discussion in the Astrocon Slack channel.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, I thought I owed some people a comment on that.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Josh. Yeah, so there are a few things that are kind of on the immediate horizon, and then probably the longer term plan things will fall out over the next month or two here as we're trying to figure out what our future is beyond that. Let's see. So there's a question about, okay, along with module deprecation Asterisk 19, do you anticipate there being any module deprecation in Freepbx? So Lauren, I'm guessing this is probably a me-you thing, right?
I guess, yes. I can say that in Freepbx 16, we have formally deprecated the old REST API module. All of its functionality is now in the API module that was new in 15. What am I forgetting? The Digium Phones module has not been updated for 16 either, so all its functionality has been moved to the Endpoint Manager, or is in the process of moving to EPM. I think those are the only two deprecated modules for 16. Am I forgetting anything?
Those are a few that I'm aware of, yeah. So there are probably a few in Freepbx land, but it's probably, I think those are the immediate ones that at least come to mind that have changed. All right, there's a question about where the next in-person Astrocon will be located, and I have no idea about that question. That's above my pay grade, so I'm going to have to pass on that. There's another one about decaps. I, again, probably talked to the training department about that one. Let's see, there's another one that is just the words deprecate the dial plan. And I'm going to say, James, please ask that in the form of a question instead of a statement. That's kind of a running joke. I think James Finstrom likes to, he very commonly pushes for that, or at least has been very vocal about his love to deprecate the dial plan. But I think it'd be challenging. I think there's a lot of people that still like the dial plan enough to, that if we got rid of it, it would be very, very sad for many people. All right, let's see. There's a question about, do you have a roadmap for, or perhaps the community can help out with replacing macro with GoSub for Freepbx? Yeah, I mean, that's a big kind of bit of plumbing that I think we need to take care of as far as Freepbx work goes. So as far as that goes, we accept any and all pull requests and efforts to move that forward, and we're going to be looking at it from our side internally as well, I think. So anybody that would like to participate in that effort, we welcome and would love to have involved. Josh, looks like here's one for you. Can you use those neat templates with real time?
Unfortunately not. Currently, you cannot use templates from real time. the record that we get back from real time has to contain all the data needed.
Mm. Okay. All right. The last question I've got in the queue right now is it true that with Astro 16, the auto-destruct errors disappeared in Asterisk 13.21 in the queues module that caused the massive deregistration of PJSF endpoints? And I actually have no idea what he's talking about there. So maybe, I don't know if Josh, you have a thought on that, or anybody else on the Asterisk team? Do you know what he might be referring to?
I'm not aware of anything, or nothing comes to mind in that area or issues in that area from the past. Does anyone else think of anything? AppQ as a module is something that generally doesn't receive too much of our attention. And so knowledge and remembrance of things there is not like it is for other modules.
Yeah. I was wondering if this might be a go look through change logs and commit history kind of thing to go figure out what exactly, because occasionally we do get patches for AppQ, but 13.21, I'm not sure what went in there and what may have impacted that. Our next question is, programmers of Asterisk, do you use Asterisk for any interesting after-hours projects? Ooh, I'm going to open that one up to the floor. Does anyone want to speak up about any interesting after-hours projects for Asterisk?
I wouldn't say it's an interesting after-hours project, but I will. I'm going to regret saying this. I spend time going off on wacky ideas of increasing performance just for fun. It's not like an interesting after-hours thing, but it's just random ideas come to mind.
Yeah. Trying to scratch a performance bug, that can be tricky sometimes, right?
Yeah. Lauren is probably a good person for that.
Oh, I bet Lauren's got a bunch of them.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm on the spot. At any given time, I have a breadboard with a random assortment of what's it's plugged into it, which I don't have at hand right now, but I play with home automation, Arduino, and sort of integrating back and forth with AMI. And it certainly meets the definition of interesting, but I struggle with the practicality of it at times. It's really kind of a diversion.
Yeah, for my part, I used to play with Asterisk dial plan to switch on and off some device at home automatically. So some automatic stuff. It's fun. So just for example, to play with dial something and that say the weather, the temperature, etc., something like that. It's fun. So it's just for fun. So sometimes it's good.
Thanks, Frank. All right. Anybody else want to have any pet projects they want to sacrifice to the knowledge of the general public? I respect if you want to keep any of them secret if you have them. All right. Let's see what we have. Let's see. Oh, here's a great question. What is the largest Astros system? Most simultaneous live calls have you seen? What kind of resources did it require? Man, that's a good question. I haven't done a big benchmark like that in a long time.
On purpose or by accident?
I don't think it doesn't.
I've set up dial plan loops before and gotten like simultaneous calls in the thousands with a single peer. I don't think that counts. In Freepbx support, we periodically saw Freepbx systems with thousands of extensions and hundreds of simultaneous channels. That's obviously far less than what a pure Asterisk system can accomplish. So that's those are fun ones to work on.
I think the maximum I've seen is maybe over 2,000 simultaneous calls, but I can't remember the resources for it. This was quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
It was interesting doing core show channels.
Yeah.
Where you have to wait for it.
Yeah.
It also depends on whether Asterisk is handling the RTP streams or it is just processing SIP transactions. I mean, I've seen definitely thousands of simultaneous calls. The ones that are not handling RTP, the CPU utilization is actually fairly low. I mean, it's lower than you would expect, I think. When you start handling media, then it goes up, definitely.
Yep. Yeah, I guess that's the advantage of being, a signaling proxy versus a media termination point, right?
Yeah, and more if we don't use any translation, if there is a single codec, if the network is correctly configured, etc. So simultaneous call can be very high. I remember I tested on CP up to 700 simultaneous call. So that's very easy to do, but that was a simple Asterisk server. So, but it can be very big, I think.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, I think it's funny because oftentimes I think there's a tendency now towards, I remember many years ago working on Astros that there would be this, it was the simultaneous calls, number of simultaneous calls kind of arms race, see how big you could get it. And it's like nowadays people are more focused on horizontal scalability in terms of deployment and, how many eggs in one basket and whatever. And so it's like there's been, I think, less push on the high end in many cases. Not absolutely. Like some people still like to get large densities of calls on a single system, but I guess there's been a lot less emphasis or push, I guess, from the community perspective. A lot of people have done deployments a little bit differently, I think, in probably the last 5 years or so.
Those the subscribes can get you too if you're not careful. You get a lot of BLFs people set up and they do that in parallel. That's one thing that you don't expect, and then ta-da.
And then somebody asked, what is the typical limit in those cases? And they asked if it was CPU or, I guess probably CPU in a lot of those cases. Would you?
It really depends, because if you're processing just voice calls and you're handling the media, that's one thing. If you're processing video calls and passing them through Asterisk, then you have to start looking at network utilization as well as CPU.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking about voice calls in my head, but that's actually one thing the last few years that's been very eye-opening with all the video stuff we've done, right, George?
Yep.
It's like the network suddenly starts becoming the least common denominator for a lot of that, right?
And then if you're doing something like real time, network impacts you there as well. Disk, the actual database performance itself, it can compound a lot.
And DNS queries and all the associated stuff that goes along, with any system that you forget about it. As Mike pointed out, if you have lots of phones, you've probably got lots of little blinky lights, right? And every one of those is a subscription, and every one of them notifies every time, one phone starts a call, that sends out notifies to every other phone that is subscribed to that extension.
I've seen a lot of people shoot themselves in the foot with call recordings too. If they get very, very permissive, or they forget that they're recording every incoming call, and then on top of it, if you're using like a SAN or something like that underneath a virtual machine, you get those IOs immediately.
Yeah.
It depends. It depends what the kind of module we need, application we need to use. Indeed, call recording report it's amazing. It's crazy. But if for us any single server, that's fine. But it's evident if you add multiple application, the CPU is working on this same application, so this is a problem. But I think it's permit to stack some server to share the media. I think there is always a solution to share the media. Anyway, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, everybody. All right, so there's a question of, and this is probably leading, it's funny, Mike brought up the SAN and the storage IO bandwidth and things like that, but that's a great lead into what does anybody have a favorite bug that they would like to talk about?
Yeah, debugging real-time situations when Asterisk is in a virtual machine and database is being shared across a SAN with the rest of a company's HR and payroll and you name it systems, and they want to know why their call completion times aren't as good as they should be.
Yeah. So like I guess dependent layers, right? Like in the stack, things that you assume are a non-issue become an issue when you start dealing with volume, latency, and scale, right, George?
Well, yeah, it's the virtualization where you don't know what else is being virtualized along with Asterisk.
Yeah.
If you're running 10 Asterisk instances in a hypervisor, that's one thing because at least you know what the usage profile looks like. But if you're running Asterisk in the same hypervisor as your corporate database server and your human resources systems and your payroll system and everything else, then you are working with very large unknowns.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Is this like, are they asking like favorite bug in the past, or is this like favorite type of bug?
I don't know. You just said what's your favorite bug, so I think it's however you want to answer it, Matt.
I mean, it's really weird. I really like the security ones because those are kind of always interesting, like where you can manipulate the system into doing weird things. But I also can't really talk about the security stuff really in detail as much as I'd like. But there's been some very interesting ones, at least on the Freepbx, that it's just like, wow, I didn't know you could do that with code.
Yeah. Yeah, that is actually a class of bugs as a developer that are always like, they're kind of unique in terms of how people pry into things that aren't intended to be pried in or whatever, right?
All time, I was going to say that subscribe notify, those like 2 to the end notifies we had for a while there, where someone would you'd have unsolicited subscriptions, and all of a sudden you'd get 2 of them, and then 4 of them, and then 8 of them, and 16 of them, and why did it all break so fast?
Yeah. Yep.
I don't really have a specific bug in mind, but I've done this a couple of times where I've been working on an issue and just thought, who wrote this? And then to get blame showed that it was me. And I just get a little bit enjoyment out of that every single time.
That's an awesome answer, Ben. I hate it when I do that. You're like, who is this person? You start shaking your fist or whatever, and you're like, oh, darn, that's my command.
That's not too bad, though, Ben, because that shows growth on your part. It's worse when you see something say, that's really clever. Who wrote this? And it ends up being you.
All right, anybody else have a favorite bug?
I mean, I like SIP protocol issues. Those are fun. Yeah. As someone who's been around SIP for a long time, it's also fun that based on the protocol characteristics of SIP messages, you can tell the SIP stack that they originated from. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a Cisco. I know this, even though it's not telling me. Fun times.
could you like actually make that into a module? Like was like queso for SIP packets?
Oi.
Res culp identification or whatever. I don't know.
I'll be the guy that says that he enjoys solving deadlocks.
Oh yeah.
So I found them. They're usually a good challenge. It's nothing better than looking through a back trace, finding threads where the deadlocks may occur, and actually finding where it is and solving the problem. So it's very satisfying.
Kevin, I would have admitted that. We're gonna have to give you the deadlock hat.
Memory leaks are a close second, I guess.
That's also a trap, though, right? Because you could do the git blame and see, damn, I caused that deadlock.
Yeah. Well, it's Ben that probably, right? He just admitted that. So.
All right. Anybody else? All right. So I'm gonna move on to our next question. What is the most effective operating system for Astros at large? And I don't even know if I can touch this one, but does anybody want to take a gander?
Pretty sure it's Linux, isn't it? Anyone disagree with that?
I think it's a good.
You know what? It runs fine on Linux and BSD. The choice of distribution is whatever you are most comfortable administering is the bottom line. I mean, we do all our testing on CentOS, but that's only because our own products are based on CentOS. But
I should also throw out, as a project, we support Linux. Everything else, like BSD, is community supported. And then within Linux, we support non-end-of-life versions of Ubuntu, CentOS. What else am I forgetting?
Fedora.
Anyone who wants to see the list, it's on the Asterisk Wiki under supported platforms, I believe.
Yeah.
At the origin, Asterisk was installed on Fedora, no? Or maybe I'm wrong.
It is. I run my own PBX on Fedora.
Yeah, I think Mark Spencer ran Fedora for a very long time too. So it was a near and dear distribution to him.
By the way, I think Red Hat, Fedora is on top of Red Hat. Fedora is the mainstream.
Yep.
Yeah, so that includes EPEL, the enterprise Red Hat distributions.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as, I guess, the original question about effective OS for Astros at large, yeah, I mean, I agree with George. You know, Astros, so from an Astros project perspective, like if you're running on a Linux, on a modern kernel, then you're probably going to see, you're probably going to see roughly the same performance across distributions, depending on, there could be some nuance depending on how distributions do like kernel aspects of kernel configuration and how they support the hardware and things like that. But, from an Astros project perspective, like, Astros likes Linux. Astros likes, there's, like George said, we've got ports for like FreeBSD, I think. But, from a day-to-day, what does the dev team run is, we like Linux. And we're not too picky about Linuxes.
If someone want to try Sun Solaris, why not?
Yeah, actually, there were patches a long time ago for I don't know if they're still actively maintained, but somebody was running it.
Anyway, it's not Linux, it's Unix. It's through Unix. So Linux is Unix anyway. So it's the same language, System 5, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure that's true anymore. I know that the current version of Asterisk will not run on Solaris. I don't remember if Mac OS is BSD enough that it will run unmodified on Mac OS.
I think it's BSD.
It was at one point. I don't know if anyone maintained it.
At one point it was, yes, and at one point it ran fine on Solaris, but I don't think that's the case anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if those patches have been maintained. I think you might be right, George.
Yeah.
All right. That's probably a pretty good conclusion to that question. So, just generally speaking, Linux is a good platform for Asterisk. It sounds like that we do a lot of in-house testing on CentOS, so that might be a good place to look to. But just generally, if you're running on Linux, you should be in a really good spot as far as your Asterisk installation. All right, so there's a question that says, something we've been talking about was separating the CDR database server into a central server. Any downsides to such? Anybody want to try to answer that one?
In general, sending your CDRs to a different database than your configuration database is probably a good idea.
Watch out for time zones.
Watch out for time zones, yeah. Yeah, because they have two different profiles, right? CDRs are generally going to be write a lot. Configuration is going to be read a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's let's see, you said you wanted to separate the database server into a central server. I don't know if that means moving CDRs onto a central server that's aggregated with other stuff, or it means peeling off CDRs to their own database. But if you do have a lot of call volume and you see potential performance problems that could be impacted by shared database, resources or whatever, I guess that's a possibility, is to separate it out to a separate database. But it's just going to depend on your workload. All right. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it on the question front. Are there any other ones that I missed in the Slack that we need to cover? All right, well, in that case, I think we'll call it. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming to AstriCon this year. Sorry again, we had to do a virtual one. It was a bummer that we weren't able to see each other in person this year, but it's a challenging time to do an in-person conference, or at least it was when we were trying to figure out whether or not we would be able to keep doing one this year. It was very difficult with the data, the COVID data and all that. So hopefully next year we'll see, be able to see each other again. But thank you all for your participation. Thanks to all the speakers who took time to plan and present this year. And thanks to everybody in the Asterisk as well as the Freepbx community for all the contributions that you make to those projects, whether it be answering questions on mailing lists or community forums, trying to push new patches and functionality up, or being able to promote it from a business perspective as well. Like all the different ways that we can proliferate those projects, I think is good for them. Anyway, everybody have a good year, and we'll see you all around.